Welcome to DABCC Radio,
where smart people listen.
Virtualization and Cloud Talk.
Featuring cutting-edge solutions from the hottest companies around the globe.
Broadcasting from the DABCC offices in sunny Sarasota, Florida.
Surrounded by computers, books, and Legos. Your host, Douglas Brown.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DABCC Radio. I love this episode. We have Simon Townsend with us, and Simon's, someone I'd call a friend and someone I've known for a long time. So I'm really happy to have him at IGEL. He's our Chief Marketing Officer nowadays, and don't let that marketing confuse you. Simon's as technical as anyone I've ever known, but at the same time, he's a marketing genius and really understands, but he's the complete ticket. So really excited to have him on. He's one of those guys you just sort of get out of his way and let it listen and learn a lot. So we're going to talk a bit about what he's doing at IGEL, the changing world, cloud, WVD, COVID, I mean, you name it. So a whole slew of things. Let's just, without me talking anymore, let's get to Simon. So I'm really excited about my interview here with Simon Townsend, the Chief Marketing Officer at IGEL Technology. Okay, Simon, thanks so much for taking the time. I'm looking forward to this. It's always so much fun. You've been on the show many times, so it's always a joy to have you.
It's definitely a pleasure to be back, Doug. Thank you for taking the time and letting me come on.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure. So you're working at IGEL now, and have we had you on since you joined IGEL? I don't remember. I don't think so. Have we?
I don't know. I think we had some. I think we had some plans that we might have done a podcast just as I joined, but I'm sure it was the same for you, right? You sort of take on the new job, you get chucked in at the deep end, and before you know it, you've been there a year, 18 months, 2 years, and so I don't think we have.
Yeah, I don't think I know. We did the one with the Dutch guys. What was the name? That was a fun podcast. Those guys are really great guys.
EUC Digest. Yeah,
that's exactly right. I love that. Yeah, absolutely. That's good stuff. Absolutely. It's too early. We did a happy hour last night for the community. Way too late, and now I'm a little bit groggy. So I'll let you do the talking. Sound good?
Oh yeah, that's great. Okay. What time did you finish?
We finished at about 2 a.m.
Okay.
So, but it was a lot of fun, and from time to time on the IGEL community, just everyone knows the routine, right? You're not doing the in-person conferences and stuff, so they're doing these sort of Zoom happy hours, and the folks that join it, it's not one of those join if you can, leave when you must type of deals, right? And the people that join tend to be the folks that spend a lot of time in the community. The typical community characters, right? The folks that are at the pub at 2:00 in the morning at Synergy, right? Those guys. And So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of just joking back and forth. There's no agenda whatsoever. We're not talking about IGEL. We're talking about old computers and when the COVID thing hit, we were doing these and it was all about COVID, right? No, we don't even talk about that anymore. I think we talked about virtual reality headsets and stuff like it. It was just a lot of fun, just pure geeking out, joy. So we were supposed to go an hour.
So that was all for the IGEL community and what held at that time so that you could accommodate the globe, right? I mean, you've got people in the community who are, in far-flung places like Australia and New Zealand, right?
Yeah, you got it. Because we used to do them at 5:00 CET time, so 5:00 Central European time, right? Then we could get, basically the entire world in, minus the folks down under. The problem was, the folks, and it's not, it's supposed to be the sort of happy hour, and the guys in the U.S. at 8:00 or 11:00 in the morning might not be that happy yet. And we wanted to include, we have some really great guys from New Zealand, Carl, for example, from New Zealand. We wanted to have him join us. So we figured, hey, why don't we just do 8, and so we're going to start doing a few of these things late. So anyone listening, if you want to join our happy hours, well, first of all, join the community. And then when you're in the community, you'll see this posted in our announcements or chit chat channel, and join. It's a lot of fun with just a bunch of nerds hanging out, chatting about whatever. So
yeah, Hey, listen, this is a loaded question, but how is that community going? Where are we up to in terms of numbers now?
That, you know what? That's a thanks so much. I'm glad to. I'm totally happy to sidetrack this whole conversation around community if you want. We won't though. But yeah, we did. I think we just hit 3,700 members. Almost up to, actually we passed 37. We're almost up to 3,800 members. But the piece that really intrigues me most is we're at like 125 messages posted. And that's really that shows the the interaction between the people, right? That it's actually, not just a bunch of people join in and do nothing, but a bunch of people are joining and they're interacting with each other, answering questions, or asking questions, answering questions, sharing information. Hey, we did this. Hey, have you seen this? And it's truly it's truly community. It's not a support forum. I mean, we have that aspect, right? It's not just a place for people to, bitch or whine and complain. We have that aspect in a way, although not really bitching, whining, and complaining, but you know what I mean? It's really all the above. It's a true sort of user group community. I couldn't be happier.
No, that's really good. 125,000. That's amazing.
Isn't that insane? Amazing. I mean, we all know, everyone's listening, you've been to many different websites, and in DABCC, one of the big issues was you can post things, but getting people to communicate, getting people to leave comments was difficult, right? Brian did a great job with that. The comments were a lot of fun. They were almost as fun to read the comments as it was to read the article, right? Back in the heyday of brianmadden.com, right? But if you looked at it, it was really the same folks. Now you had people come and go and what have you, just like anything. But that's one of the very few sites I can think of that was able to really get an interaction between people. And now to do that within, something like the IGEL community and have that much interaction between tons of different people is really, it's beyond my wildest dreams, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think, you know my background anyway, Doug, right?
Sure.
But when I'm not trying to do marketing, I do like to try and take some time to still go and have a little play with technology, at least in a bit of a lab. And the whole fact that community is on Slack, the fact that you've got these channels, the fact that it's all searchable. I mean, I myself, I check in every now and again. I must admit, I don't give anywhere near as much as I should do to it. But the information that even I've been able to get out of it just to be able to continue my development and understanding of the product has been phenomenal. And I know feedback from the customers and the partners I speak to is great as well. So good job on that. And I think it's testament to the work that you've done. I think it's also quite interesting in that it really demonstrates to me that we have moved from being just a hardware thin client vendor to one that is an operating system. And I know me and you have had this conversation quite a few times, but when you think about IGEL historically and you think about, hey, thin client vendor, you may well have had a question in your mind, which is, well, why do you need a community and why do you need to gather that much technical information about a thin client vendor, right? I mean, surely every thin client piece of hardware has got a PDF and it says what the power consumption is and how much RAM it's got in it, how many graphics ports it's got. But the truth is when you look at the software element of what we're doing, we are now talking about how do we integrate, the deployment and management of our software with other systems via APIs and what APIs exist, etc. How do we deploy third-party applications such as, native Teams and native Zoom, for instance? And, how do we use these things called custom partitions? And there's a whole host of conversations that are going on about how people are using the operating system in a whole host of different ways. And that community is helping people not just understand what it's capable of, but also how to actually go about and achieve that. Upgrades, migrations, patching, creating different profiles, creating different groups, updating to the latest version of the WVD client, for instance. I mean, they're all there, right?
I love that you say that. You're exactly 100% correct. I think that, one, it shows the the success of the IGEL community shows not, that, hey, Doug built a great community. No, whoopee. I put together some Slack stuff, right? It shows that we have really passionate customers and partners, right? But it really shows what you're talking about. And I was talking to someone via, I think, email, maybe Slack, maybe last week or the week before, and they said, when I think of a thin client, I think you just turn it on and it works. But what I realized that IGEL is much more than that. Yes, when you turn it on, it works, but there's so much more you can do with it. And there's so many different configurations. This is really a piece of software, is what the guy said, which is exactly what you just said, right? When you think of it, it's not just a dumb box that, it's not a dumb terminal. And a thin client was sort of the next generation dumb terminal, right? You had MetaFrame or WinFrame. Now you come in, you bring in the dumb terminal like you had in the mainframes, right? What IGEL brings, and this is what you and I both realized when we came to IGEL, we knew it a little bit prior, but we really hit us hard when we joined the company, right? Is that, wait a second, this is not a thin client. This is an operating system. We can do so much with this thing. And it's, I used to always say, every time I would do a session with or watch a session from an SC or, one of anybody really, and they'd do a demo of what the UMS could do and what we could do with IGEL OS, you would just it was like peeling the layers off the onion. You're like, oh my God, you can do that. And this was like 2 years of me experiencing this, going, wow, you can really do this. But it was none of it's really heavily complicated too. It's just, you need to know how to do it. Of course, anytime you're dealing with tech, there's issues, right? There's, how do I do this or does this work with this, right? I mean, that's just software in general, right? But yeah, you're exactly right. It's it's amazing it's amazing to see what's going on and the questions they're asking, and it proves exactly what we're saying, in a marketing sense, right? We're not a thin client. We're an operating system, and I love that.
It's really interesting because I think if I look back over the last 20 years, when I came into Citrix and I got introduced to Citrix, there was almost two options. When it came to the endpoint, you were like, right, I'm either going to deploy thin client, and that's going to be my most cost-effective, simple way of deploying Citrix, or I'm going to give people a Windows PC, and they're going to use their Windows PC for some things, and then they're going to connect into Citrix. And I would argue that, it was quite simple back then, because you literally took two different types of work. You said, right, do I have power users that I might want to deploy full-blown PCs out to and just allow them access to Citrix applications? Or have I got a ton of task-based workers who basically just need a Citrix-delivered desktop? But the truth is that today, those two opposites don't necessarily exist. Even the task worker of today wants to be able to tap and go with a card as opposed to logging in. Even the task-based worker of today needs access to Teams and wants to be able to plug in a headset and do video conferencing and collaborate. Even a task-based worker today wants to be able to fire up a web browser and access, websites, SaaS-based applications without having to go through, their Citrix connection. So what you've ended up with is a need that the thin client needs to deliver significantly more than what it was doing 20 years ago, but organizations still don't want to have to deploy the fully blown, horrible to manage, painful to manage, costly Windows-based environment. And I think that's the sweet spot that we're now starting to see that IGEL fills. And you look at the 90 plus technical integrations that we've got going on with Improvata and Device Trust and Printer Logic and Liquidware and all of those other ones that we work with, their software is being built in so that we can just enable our users to do more from their endpoint, but also reduce the burden that we place on IT. And, I know I've gone into a bit of a marketing spin there, but I do think it's quite interesting. I think the user demands and requires more than what they did 10, 15, 20 years ago from just a box that, just to your point, you switch on and it just boots up. We're in a different place right now.
I think you're exactly right. And if you think about those days, a lot of it was, okay, let's deploy a line of business application, right? It was, we can install it once and we can take that out to many so that we don't have to then deploy that application on many different devices. Maybe it was, Great Plains Dynamics, which was a pain in the butt to install and update and, and patch and blah, 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 blah. So we can put this on a Citrix server. And that made sense to have the ICA client in those days down there, right? But now there's much more to it. And then you also mentioned, I love that you mentioned this too, is that one of the cool things that you and I both see with IGEL OS is that it's not just about connecting into those back-end applications. Also, we can, a lot of people today are using SaaS applications, so we can deploy those directly onto the desktop of the IGEL OS and have them launch that, something like a Zoom or a Teams, right? Or just, a connection to a back-end service like Salesforce or something that's a web-based application, right? So you really are creating this operating system that is just enough OS that's locked down, secured, right? It gives them exactly what those people need. And then wherever they go, they get that same experience, right? It's like, I sort of describe IGEL sort of like Citrix. Citrix was about, but the Citrix was this for the application, right? We bring that anywhere, any device, any time computing to the device itself, to the operating system level, right? Where Citrix stopped at the operating system level, right? It was about the application being deployed. And we're doing that for the device itself, and then for the app that makes sense to have on those devices. And like you said, without the big nightmare of dealing with Windows is a great operating system. Don't get us wrong, right? It's a wonderful operating system, and there's a purpose for it, but as I think you said it well, is it belongs in the cloud, and Microsoft is doing this with with WVD and things like that. And then let's let the front end be managed or be more secure, be more flexible, right? Especially in today, especially with COVID, you're seeing the hackers and what have you coming out of the woodwork even more, right?
Yeah.
I think go ahead.
Yeah, I think I think some of it comes down to performance on the endpoint as well. It's a silly example, but here I am sat in my office right now. Next door is my son. He's on a Teams call being educated from home. Now, I had got him some, Lenovo 4 gigabyte of RAM, non-solid state laptop that I'd sort of pulled out of a cupboard from years ago when he first started to have to be educated from home. And very quickly, it became very apparent that this thing just didn't have enough grunt to run Windows 10. Yep. And and now if I go next door, there he is. He's got an IGEL operating system. He's got the Chromium web browser. He can access most of the stuff that he does. If he wants to launch Teams, he can launch Teams natively. Yes, he's not going to be loading, Fortnite onto it and playing the latest games on it. But the point being is he's got something that is, I know it's secure, I know it's performant, and he's able to get those tasks done. And actually at the moment, that's all he cares about. And we're seeing a similar thing happen within our customers as well at the moment, which is, I think when we went through the very initial phase of getting people to work at home, those people that were using Citrix and VMware, they suddenly turned around and said, right, let's just put everybody or as many people as we can onto Citrix and VMware and extend our VDI deployment. And for a lot of people, what that meant was they just sent them home and they said, right, doesn't matter what device you had at home, open up a web browser and use the web browser to access VDI and desktop as a service, right? So, hey, I open up a web browser, I get access to my Citrix workspace, I get access to Horizon, and away I go. Interestingly enough, whatever it is now, 7, 8, 10, 9, 10 weeks on, what we're seeing is those customers are now coming back to both ourselves and Citrix and VMware and saying, right, we did enough to get people to work at home, but now we actually need to come back round because we're starting to realize that delivering that session just via a web browser doesn't give them enough, right? And it comes back to that point I was making of 20 years ago with a standard thin client. If this is going to be a long-term thing, and people are going to need to have the same consistent performant environment day in, day out, regardless of whether they're in the office or whether they're at home, then, the web client isn't necessarily enough. And a lot of organizations are now coming back and they're saying, okay, well, what is running on the endpoint? Is it secure? Is it running Windows 7? Is it running 10? Is it running the latest version of 10? Has it been patched? We did a survey. I don't know whether you saw that ESG survey we did. Yeah. It's available on the website, obviously. But, I think it was 65% of the people that we surveyed, even though they had VDI and desktop as a service in place, they still required a level of visibility, if not management and policy, on the endpoint. And so we're seeing a lot of people come back around now and saying, okay, we got Citrix out there. Now what we need to do is we now need to address what's running on the endpoint. And I think that's where the IGEL OS can play the part. And that, again, they're the conversations that we're seeing in the community as well.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. And COVID changed everything. And, you talk about this new normal. And I was doing a podcast with somebody and they said, I really hate hearing this new normal. And I sort of do too, but it's true, right? So I hate hearing about COVID also because it's not necessarily a good thing, but it definitely changed things. What do you see? What do you think the lasting effects are going to be of COVID-19? Do you think we'll stick around with this work from home thing? What are you hearing? What do you believe?
What do I believe and what I would like, I think, are probably slightly different. I would like to go back to something that is as close to normal as possible, or what historically normal was. Call me traditional. I enjoyed going into the office. I enjoyed getting on a plane. I enjoyed meeting with the folks like you and everybody else on a regular basis. I really miss the personal interaction. And when people say, well, the world's never going to be normal again, that makes me quite sad, actually. I don't want to bring the tone of this podcast down, but it does make me sad. It's like, I enjoyed what was normal. Now, what I would say is that on a personal level, I hope that we learn from this. And I do hope that the new norm is an evolution of what the old normal was, right? So I'd like to think that we can get on planes, travel, meet up, engage face-to-face, and not have to worry about, the germs and the pandemic that we're currently seeing. But obviously, it would be great for the world to learn that, you don't have to jump on a plane just to go and do an 8-hour meeting in the future. We can reduce our carbon footprint. We can have a better work-life balance. We can spend more time with our loved ones. We can be productive and achieve things even when we work from home. We can change company cultures, etc. That's what I would like to see happen. What I think will happen, particularly in the short to the midterm, is that this concept of work from home will start to fade. And why I say that is that historically we've kept these two things very separate. We've been like, either you're based in the office or you're based work from home. And the truth is that these two things need to come together. And it's just like, hey, are you going to work tomorrow? Yes, I am. And I'm going to need a workspace delivered to whatever my workplace is. And it's just going to have to work. And so, we're making plans at the moment about how we bring people back into the office as and when it's safe and to do so. There are companies that I've spoken to recently that are talking about this concept of red and green days. I don't know whether you've come across this, Doug, but this concept.
I don't know this concept.
Well, it's very simply, it's basically giving you a color or a days that you're allowed to go into the office, right? We can't take everybody back into the office all at the same time. So what we're basically going to say is, okay, well, during week 1, Doug's allowed to go into the office. During week 2, Simon's allowed to go into the office. Or maybe we'll have red days and green days where red employees are allowed to come in and green ones stay at home. And it's meant to be a way of sort of formalizing how we balance that return to work and that we enable social distancing and that type of thing. But the truth is however an organization goes about it, whether you're Twitter and you say, hey, everybody can work from home forever, or whether you're an organization, and some do, they need to get people back into the office. We're not just going to all go back at the same time. And workspace mobility, employee mobility, being able to work from anywhere is going to become the norm. So I'd like to think that we move on from calling it work from home, and I think we just look at how do we enable our employees to work in the most mobile way possible and deliver them a consistent, secure, performant environment regardless of where they are.
Very interesting, very interesting. And how do you see IGEL affecting that? I know we have some programs and things like that about, but also the technology itself. Do you see us changing our roadmaps, doing different things in the future to address this thing that just came out of the blue, right? And change sort of how everyone thought about what was, we didn't, when we met at Disrupt in January and early February, we never thought about any of this, right? So it definitely changes a lot of different things, even on how you develop software. What do you think the effect is on IGEL, and what do you think, and how can we help companies and customers and users to deal with it all?
Yeah, I think comes down to a couple of things. First of all, you've got your existing IGEL customers who have typically either had the hardware and the software installed within their office, right? So let's take an environment, right? There's an office block somewhere. It's got capacity for 300 employees. They decided to purchase IGEL. They're using our solution in the confined of that office. What we've seen is that as those employees have had to go home, we have seen them wanting to manage that estate and those endpoints in the same way as they had been when those endpoints were in the office. And so what we've seen is that people have said, actually, that software, that operating system and the ease of management that we had for the 300 endpoints, the 300 thin clients that we had in our office, I want that same level of management, but I now want it remotely. I want to be able to deploy a secure operating system down to my users when they're at home. I want to be able to manage it in exactly the same way. I want to be able to update it in exactly the same way. And so one of the things that we've seen and one of the things that we've done is we've obviously put some additional promotions, bundles, and technology changes in place that will allow people to do that. So, first of all, we've changed how we license our technology. We've put things like custom partition support into the IGEL OS so people can install applications natively. We've enabled people to deploy the software quicker by giving people 90-day evals so they can do mass deployment significantly quicker of the software. And we've also put this work from home kit together. And that work from home kit is in essence includes that USB, the UD Pocket device that I know some people will be familiar with, and also our ICG, our cloud gateway technology. And immediately what that's meant is that people that are working from home have the ability to run IGEL on any endpoint and for IT to manage it in the same way they've been managing their office environments for a while. What we do moving forward, I think, is going to become very, very interesting, because where we really need to move to, in my opinion, is we need to make the adoption of that IGEL operating system as simple as possible. I think we're going to see an increase in the amount of native applications that people want to run. We're already seeing that, we've had the Firefox web browser built in for a while. We've already seen a whole host of people say, hey, I want some form of Chrome on there, and we're enabling that via the custom partition support. So, expect to see Chromium come into the default OS soon. Native Teams, native Zoom support, I think enabling functionality like that. Customers have been calling us up saying, hey, we want VPN connections out of the box. So we've been helping organizations enable that. But I think when it comes to management, I do see a lot of enterprises deploying Intune and Workspace ONE. And I know one of the things that we're really focused on now is integrating the management of IGEL endpoints with Intune and Workspace ONE, because that ultimately gives people a single framework, a single I don't want to say single pane of glass, but I'm going to say it's a single pane of glass.
It's okay, man. It's okay.
Manage it. Yeah, we should have had it. We should have had one of those one of those bingo term things to tick off, right? And you could slap my wrist every time I raise something up the flagpole, or get it done by the close of play, or all those buzzwords that you come out with. But single pane of glass is definitely one of those, isn't it? But the point I'm trying to make here is that we are going to need to be able to deploy the IGEL operating system in the most easiest possible way, allow users to get up and running, and then continue to update that. And interestingly enough, one thing I will talk about is is what we call the OSC, the Operating System Creator Tool. And again, I don't know whether you've had a chance to look at that, Doug, but it is one of these tiny, tiny things that we've released, like a tool almost, that we've released to market. And yet it's a game changer. And the reason why it's a game changer is that it's the IGEL operating system wrapped up in an MSI file, which can be deployed via your existing PC lifecycle management tool like SCCM or Intune or Workspace ONE. So you deploy this MSI file out to your existing Windows estate, and then when you're ready, you can instruct that MSI file to reboot the machine, wipe it, and boot it back up and install the IGEL operating system. So no longer are people having to go around to machines and put a USB key in and convert them or dual boot. You've got a way now of centrally deploying IGEL via an existing tool and saying, right, at a given date and time, I'm going to flip those machines to become IGEL machines, and all of a sudden they're all being managed and they're all under that single management. So that OSC tool that we've released, I think, is incredibly powerful, and I know a number of organizations have been waiting for that for a while.
Absolutely. We've seen a lot of interest in that in the community for sure. I mean, that's one of those things. It's just a long time coming, right? I like the fact that you brought up, and I want to go down this path for a little bit about integration with other tools, because I do like that a lot. And I'm going to say to that single pane of glass, right? Because customers have a tool that they use, and the last thing they want is yet another tool, right? But there's another phrase for you, yet another tool, right? So can you talk a bit more about that? Can you share any insights? I mean, I hear a lot in the community about enhancing our APIs. And do you think that, not to get too technical here, but do you see enhancements to the APIs for that? Or is this turnkey type of integration? How's this going to work? Where are we going with this?
Yeah. So I think there'll be two parts to this. I think on one hand, as a business, we have kicked off a number of projects specifically around Intune, or I think Intune's renamed now, isn't it? Microsoft Endpoint Manager, but Intune is the name that we all know and love. There'll be one part which is kicking off development work with the likes of Intune, with the likes of Workspace ONE, and focusing on how we deploy that technology and integrate that technology with those platforms. The second piece, I think, is around APIs, because outside of the EUC world, there is another single pane of glass that we in end user computing tend to forget about, which is around service management. And so if I go and have a look at BMC, if I go and have a look at Ivanti, if I go and have a look at ServiceNow, those tools have moved from being just traditional ticket-based systems that IT use to log calls to actually tools that actually deal with providing service management. And in many cases, you've got tasks and processes that are being implemented into those platforms to allow automation. And I think we've already seen some customers linking the IGEL management into those systems via the API. But I think we're on a bit of a journey with our API. The APIs exist, but they've not been, I'm just going to use the word wrapped. They've not been productized to where I think they need to be. And I think jointly between IGEL, the community, and potentially some customer scenarios that we know we're going to have to implement, I think we'll go on that journey and we'll start to wrap and productize those APIs significantly better so that we can deliver those out to the market with ease. I mean, the other technologies that I'm quite interested in at the moment is things like automation anywhere and also the Blue Prism stuff. I don't know whether you've seen these types of what are they, RPA type of products, right? But people are consistently looking at ways they can reduce the amount of man hours that they spend on deploying and managing IT. And IGEL is already a massive improvement from how you would manage Windows, right? I mean, it really doesn't need a great deal of investment. I think we've got customers who quite openly have stood on stage with us and said, you know what? I've got one guy managing 25,000 IGEL devices. So it doesn't need a great deal of operational cost anyway. But if you can integrate those with, the Blue Prisms, the automation tools, the service management tools, and what we would look at as the new modern management tools as well, I think that really is when we start to get into managing these things at scale significantly easier.
Yeah, I agree with you. One of the other things you brought up is custom partitions. This is a very technical term, and in many ways that I don't think everyone understands unless you're an IGEL guy, right? So can you talk a bit? Well, first of all, do we ever plan on changing that name? Maybe give it a fancy name, right? You're the marketing guy. But can you talk a bit about what this is? Because I think it's one of the things both you and I, when we both joined IGEL and started learning about, we looked at the custom partitions. We're like, wow, the potential here is huge. We already touched upon that a little bit, but can you go down the path of explaining custom partitions?
Yeah. I would love to change the name of it, by the way, Doug.
Yeah?
I would love to change the name of it.
I bet you would.
Yeah, I'm probably going to get my hand slapped by our CTO when he listens back to this, but leave that one with me. In real simplistic terms, the IGEL operating system, first and foremost, is based on Linux. It's 64-bit Ubuntu, which I expect most people already know, but it's read-only. So that means that everything that's baked into the operating system is read-only, which makes it obviously incredibly secure. But when you want to deploy an additional tool, executable application, let's take Teams, the Linux version of Teams as an example, because it's read-only, you obviously can't install it onto that particular part of the OS, that partition. And so the custom partition is a separate partition on the endpoint, which is actually writable. And so of the 90 technical integrations we've got, if I take a look at the login VSI Pi agent, if I take a look at the Liquidware agent, the Printer Logic agent, the Citrix client, the WVD client, which has just been updated, they're all baked into the read-only part of the OS. As soon as I want to install a third-party native application, I use this custom partition to do that. And in real simplistic terms, it allows me to take a Linux application, package it up centrally, put it into our UMS, our management platform, and deploy it out to hundreds, if not thousands of machines, and allow people to run that application natively. Importantly, one of the changes we made probably back in March now, I think it was, is that custom partition support, which was an additional license cost historically, is now part of the standard offering. So if you've got the Workspace Edition, if you're running IGEL OS today, if you upgrade to I think it's 11.3.500, then you get the ability to deploy custom partitions. And I'll be honest with you, in my lab, I've been deploying a whole host of things. So there's some videos that I posted online recently. You can see that I've got the Chrome browser in as a custom partition. I've got Teams. I've got Zoom. We've had some customers deploy Ring Central. This ability to deploy third-party native applications down to the IGEL OS and allow them to run locally, it's been uber important as we've had to go into shelter in place and everything that's been going on with COVID, because people need these collaboration tools. And to be fair, when you want to run Teams via WVD or Citrix, etc., even Citrix and WVD, they are trying to develop and improve on that functionality themselves. So having an option that you can run Teams natively outside of your Citrix session is actually allowing people to do just that and work securely from home.
I love it. Well done. So you keep mentioning WVD, and this is one of those things that's, before the world changed, we had Disrupt, our big customer conference and partner conference in January and February, early February. And one of the most amazing things, I've been with the company 3.5 years, is that when I first joined, everyone said, "What are you doing? Join an IGEL." You guys all know the story, right? And then at Disrupt, Microsoft stood up on stage with us. Jed was at Ignite up on the main stage with Microsoft and talking about IGEL and WVD, right? And the integration we're doing together, the joint development we're doing together, all that stuff. And the excitement around WVD was huge. When I was at Summit, last conference I was at, actually Disrupt was the last conference, but I was at Summit, and I asked everyone I could, hey, what do you guys think of WVD? And I was expecting sort of like, hey, this is really neat. We're looking at it, we're investigating. No, they were like, this is the future. We're on it now. Our customers want it now, which really surprised me because I figured there's going to be a ramp up, right? Not just it's now. And then when COVID hits, now there's even more reason to go to the back end. There's more reason to go to the cloud. We can't go to our data centers because we're locked out, right? So WVD is huge. And IGEL has a big play there. Can you talk a bit about that? Our integration with WVD, some of the stuff we're doing with Microsoft, and of course, Microsoft being up on stage with us, because that's a story within itself, right?
Yeah, and in fact, we've got another event coming up at the end of June, which I'll try and finish on if I may.
It's on my list.
Good.
Although
good.
There's nothing on my list we've talked about. Basically, we're completely off the list, which is great, which is what I like, right? So I knew that. I didn't even think about it. I thought to myself, why even make a list? I have Simon on today, right?
Yeah. So we've got Digital Disrupt is coming 25th of June. It's an online version of Disrupt. We're currently up in excess of 650 people registered for that event now, Doug. So and we've obviously got some weeks to go yet, but the lineup is just phenomenal. Scott Manchester from Microsoft is joining us again. Cam, who's the new WVD product manager, is joining us as well. And then we've got a whole host of other vendors that have joined that event: Nerdio, CloudJumper, ControlUp, Login VSI, Liquidware, Citrix, VMware. The list goes on. So I think it just speaks to the fact that we had a really great event in February and March in Nashville and in Munich, and now we're trying to do this again to try and bring all sorts of people together. And I just love the fact that we can bring what are sometimes competing technologies together and just have open and valuable conversations around that. So that partnership with Microsoft has been in place for some time. Many people will know that yes, IGEL is and was the first Linux WVD client to market. But what you may not have been aware is that there's actually quite a lot of joint collaboration that goes on to get to that point and now continues. It's not about us taking the Linux client from Microsoft and then putting it into our operating system. It's about us working with Microsoft on that Linux SDK and providing feedback. And, the best example I can give you of that most recently actually is the fact that WVD has just gone through its spring update. So they've just moved to this ARM architecture or the ARM release. And that's obviously included some changes. And, when an organization changes, dare I say, the back end or the infrastructure and the setup in the way they do, that obviously affects the client. And, we have to work hard, as does Microsoft, in ensuring that, we can get that release out to our customers as quickly as possible. And so that relationship is incredibly important. And I think that's quite interesting as you look at all of the cloud workspace vendors out there, we've definitely seen a change. And again, I think this really speaks to, this is the only thing that IGEL does, and that allows us to be just that little bit quicker and that little bit more focused when it comes to updating our clients. And we see this within our customers. I used to deploy MetaFrame 1.8. In fact, MetaFrame XP was probably my favorite version of Citrix ever. Right, I got really involved in deploying XP. But you used to take your server, you used to put Citrix on top of it, you used to roll out the client, and then you'd say, "Thanks very much, Mr. Customer. That job is now done, and that Citrix environment is going to serve you well for the next 3, 5, 7, 8 years." Yeah, I mean, you won't have to touch it. What you see today is something that's completely different. You see Citrix Cloud, Horizon Cloud, Amazon Workspaces, and WVD, sometimes a combination of all of those, but you see them updating at a much more frequent time scale, right? I mean, they're just, before you know it, we've gone from a beta version of WVD to the GA version of WVD, and then within a couple of months, we're now on the second iteration of it, the ARM version. Citrix Cloud constantly evolving, Horizon Cloud constantly evolving, and where the cloud infrastructure is constantly evolving, the client has to stay up to date as well, in some cases, to utilize some of those features. And so being focused, and our relationships with those 4 key vendors are very, very important. And so staying up to date, making sure that we release the software as quickly as possible, trying to get to a 0-day scenario where, the moment the latest version of Citrix, the moment the latest version of WVD comes out, the client is there ready to be downloaded and deployed on IGEL platforms is very, very important. So yeah, to your point, what have we seen? We've seen organizations who, didn't have any VDI whatsoever, any desktop as a service, and within the space of 3 weeks, they'd spun up 2,000 Windows virtual desktop machines. We've seen organizations take what was a tactical deployment of Citrix and turn around to Citrix and say, "Hey, I need to spin up another 5,000 instances on Citrix Cloud because we need to work from home." So these technologies have really been helping organizations deal with the whole work from home. And in my opinion, I still see incredible value in both the Citrix and the VMware platforms, and the tools and the functionality that they provide people on top of just a vanilla VDI environment. But to your point, the big thing with WVD is multi-win. It's the licensing, right? It's the cost moving forward that is going to be the game changer. And people are chomping at the bit to say, how do I move more of my desktops to the cloud? Sustainability is one reason, right? People want to reduce their carbon footprint. People have really worried a lot about disaster recovery in the past, Doug. I need 2 data centers. I need N+1 data centers. What happens if data center 1 goes down? I might need to spin up another data center. I question how many times we actually have to use those second data centers that are just sat there with, all of those virtual machines waiting for people to log on. What we've actually seen in the last couple of months is that the DR scenario needs to apply to the user and the endpoint, not to the data center.
That's interesting.
So,
That's so true.
Anyway, I'm rambling on, but there's a lot of good reasons now: cost, functionality, simplicity, all to do with why I think desktop as a service, and in particular WVD, is a game changer.
You got it. You got it. And in many ways, WVD just legitimized. There's another buzzword for you. You know what we've been talking about. You mentioned MetaFrame XP 1.8. You know, this is the beginning of the really usable versions of back then we called server-based computing, right? Remoting. And it's just legit, yeah. And then COVID says, hey, I love that graphic, and I think probably everyone's seen this. I saw it on LinkedIn. In fact, I just saw it in a PowerPoint a couple days ago of the wrecking ball going into the conference room. Which one I'm talking about? It says COVID-19 on the wrecking ball. It's like a boardroom. It says that we can no longer wait for digital translation it says we can wait for digital transformation, blah, 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 blah. And then here comes the wrecking ball, COVID-19, right? It changes everything. No, we can't wait for these things, but we've always had these tools too. We can do this. And it just sort of legitimizes that. And of course, I mean, I see value. I always get the kick out when people, Citrix is dead. Oh, yeah. These are the same people that said Microsoft was dead, right? And Microsoft is the number one software company in the world. I mean, come on, folks. It's not, these guys have a very long life and they're doing wonderful, wonderful job. And the integration is still there in them, or the innovation. So.
I tell you what's interesting, Doug, is about 12 months ago, I was having lots of conversations with people about digital transformation. There we go, buzzword bingo again. Yeah. And at the time, we were talking to them and said, well, you really need to be spending more time and more budget on innovation and less time and money on things like managing Windows on the endpoint. Yeah. So end user computing was almost a drain, or the historic way of doing it, EUC, was a drain on the IT budget and on IT time.
Yep.
What's interesting now with what we've seen is that end user computing has now become paramount in, driving a business and allowing a business to continue to function. The argument of changing how you deliver end user computing is still the same, but it's gone from being, it consumes a boatload of our money to, actually we need it because it actually helps us make money.
Yeah.
Really, really interesting to see how that has changed over the last couple of months.
Yeah.
Exciting times for us all.
Yeah, you got it. Or, hey, we can run these 5 apps, but we don't need to transfer these 10, right? Where we can wait, right? And that's sort of what that graphic, so we can wait for this. No, we can't wait. You need to do it now. Because like you said, it helps us. This is what, moves the business forward and allows our employees to work. So that's sort of, like I always say, sort of bittersweet for an old guy like me, right? Simon, I've taken a lot of your time. I know you're a very busy guy, so I don't even want to look what your calendar looks like. But we only have a few more minutes with you. There's a couple more things I want to discuss. You mentioned Digital Disrupt. Maybe you can just real quickly talk about it, how they find that out. Where do they go to sign up at? The other thing I want to ask about is, since Jed joined IGEL, we have the best giveaways, right? We gave away 2 Teslas, like 120,000 euros or $120,000, and then what else? And then a Porsche. This year, we're doing something else, right? So maybe you can talk about that, our giveaway this year, because it's just over the top cool, right?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So easiest thing to do is go to our website, igel.com. You will see out in front of you, you'll see 2 boxes. One of those boxes is going to take you to the Workspace Cool Place microsite. And one of those graphics is going to take you to disrupteuc.vfairs.com. The first one is in relation to the giveaway. Yes, we've given away a Tesla, we've given away a Porsche, etc. We wanted to do something that was a little bit more inclusive this year. And so what we did was ultimately devise a giveaway that allowed us to give a home office makeover away. And in fact, we're giving away 2 home office makeovers. They're worth $20,000 each. One of them is open to anybody, and one of them is open to existing customers. And you can see as you take the survey, it'll ask you whether you're an existing customer. If you are, you ask answer a few additional questions, and you get put into a separate draw to increase your chances of winning that. So first and foremost, workspacecoolplace.com or via our website. Go and check that out. It gives you the ability to win a $20,000 home office makeover. And just as exciting, particularly for me, is that every quarter we're giving away $5,000 worth of home office equipment. So there are office chairs, there is a stand-up desk in that, there is a curved monitor, there is an LG Gram, there is a coffee machine, there is a IGEL thin client, there is a keyboard and a mouse combination. We've tried to put as many gadgets and home office tech into this bundle that we can. And there'll be a draw for EMEA and there'll be a draw for the US. Happens every quarter. The first draw is actually on the 25th of June at Digital Disrupt. So I'll be pulling 2 names out of the hat, one for people in EMEA and one for people in North America, and we'll be giving away 2 lots of 5Ks worth of goodies on that. So feel free to go to our website, go and check out Workspace Cool Place. We've employed and are working with a lady called Vicky Norris, who also provides hints and tips on how best to work from home. Go and check that out. You'll also see on that webpage there is a link to Digital Disrupt, where that draw will take place. Digital Disrupt is an online version of Disrupt. I mentioned earlier all of the sponsors, Microsoft, Citrix, VMware, ControlUp, Liquidware, and all of the others. We're probably going to have at least 1,000 people from the end user computing space on that. It kicks off at 10 a.m. Eastern time. Really important. You can register for that. You can see the agenda. You can see the sponsors and the speakers, etc. What's really important is that each session is only 30 minutes long. What we don't want to do is consume too much of people's time and talk for as long as I normally do, like I am right now, for too long. So each session is 30 minutes long, but each vendor's been able to submit more than just one session. And by registering, not only do you have access to the event live for that day, but you then have 30 days to go and revisit and replay all of that content. So even if you don't choose to attend all of the sessions on the day, you can go back in for 30 days afterwards and consume all of that content. So yeah, we're really impressed and really pleased with how that's panning out as well. Thank you for letting me talk to that.
Yeah, well, one more thing to say about this, and I find this really cool, is that it's not just joining a Zoom meeting, right, or a GoToMeeting. It's actually like a virtual conference. Can you explain that real quick, that people can actually go in to see booths, so to speak, and do Q&A with our partners and with IGEL folks, and because I think that's sort of neat.
Yeah, it's
I
run on
enjoyed that, and the Login VSI had that, and I know a bunch of other people
right.
did, and I really had a lot of fun at the Login VSI. I jumped around the different booths and chatted with a bunch of folks.
That's exactly it. So Login VSI use the vFairs platform. I think the VMware user group do as well. So you're actually walking into a virtual trade show. You've got the ability to go up to the reception desk and ask any questions you might have. You've got the ability to enter into the auditorium and watch the keynotes that are going to feature IGEL and Microsoft. And like Doug says, you've got the ability to go then into the expo floor, go up to various booths. Those booths are manned by real people, not by bots. So in many cases, the sponsors have got real people on the end. You can ask them questions. There's a whole host of assets, presentations, videos, PDFs that can be downloaded as well. In many cases, you can get access to people's trial software, etc. So, and we've also got some social elements going on. IGEL's become pretty famous, particularly in North America at the moment, for the Carl and Kim show. I don't know whether any of the listeners would have heard about this, but this is like an EUC trivia. Everybody's been dressing up. Everybody's been online. Everyone's been having a beer or two. We've been doing these online EUC trivia games for the last couple of weeks across a number of different events. They're proving very, very popular. We've got people returning to the events just so they can enter into these EUC trivia events. So, we want to try and make it a little bit of fun as well. It definitely won't include me talking for anywhere near as long as I've spoken this morning. I can assure you that. But, hopefully what you do get from me is a sense of, we're still very passionate people here. We've got a lot going on. We continue to try and disrupt and do more for our customers and our partners. We're very excited about what we do, and we're very excited about this event that's coming up on the 25th.
Simon, you can come on the show anytime you want. I love listening to you. I really, truly do. It's always, like I said, I sort of wrote out a list. So the folks listening, they know how we work, right? We write out a basic list of questions so that we make sure we don't end up talking about left field, right? And we sort of get to the pieces we want to discuss. With Simon, I wrote out some questions. I don't think we got to everyone, but not in any order whatsoever. And it's always it's so much fun to chat with you. I really enjoy it. So we'll have to get you on more often. Maybe we'll do it like a monthly event. I'll send you a reoccurring meeting.
Well, at least we could try and keep it to like 30 minutes then, right? If we do it on a more regular basis. I don't think that's possible, is it? No, I don't think it's possible.
One question
is possible. I do have one thing actually I will throw out there for you. Please. I mentioned at the start, yes, software is important, but we are still producing hardware. And start of this year we released something called the UD2, really neat, cost-effective, performant device. But we've just released the new UD3, and this thing is sweet. One of the things that we did is we actually got Rex Analytics and our friend Benny Trich to do some work on measuring the performance of that device. So you go and check out our blog section, and within that blog section, we announced the UD3. There's a video of the UD3 that sort of talks through the AMD chip that is on board and some of the enhanced performance and security capabilities of it. But there's also a link to the video and the investigation that Benny did for us that sort of compares how does that UD3 now perform, particularly when you start to deploy sort of like advanced graphics functionality. So, I just thought I'd call that out there just to make sure that people appreciate that, we are still churning out some very, very powerful and secure devices as well.
I love that you bring that up. It's one of the questions we get quite often, or it's one of the things our competition says, is that IGEL's moving away from hardware. We don't care about hardware anymore, and that's just absolutely not the truth. We still make great hardware, and in the hardware that we have, we're constantly making it better. So we have no plans to get out of that business whatsoever. So it's definitely great. Simon, thank you so much for taking the time. Like I said, I really enjoyed it. It's always a blast to chat with you. So I wasn't joking. I'm going to bug you more often. We'll have to do more of these things. So,
well, thank you as ever, Doug. It's always good to talk, and thanks everyone for listening.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and Simon, thank you. We'll call this an episode. Sound good?
Stay safe.
Yeah, thanks, bud. Okay, that concludes another successful episode of DABCC Radio. I love it. It's always so great to have Simon on the show with us. We started off and I told him, I was like, okay, let's start off with this question and then we can go on to this. We never did any of that. In fact, to be honest with you, we actually never introduced him. If you know the DABCC show well, you know that the first question is always, who are you and what do you do over at your company? We didn't even do that. So we went straight into talking about, community, which really made me happy. I can't complain about that. I love it. I loved chatting with Simon. He's a great guy. If you ever get a chance to really watch anything he does because he's the CMO over at IGEL, and because he's so technical, he's really very much almost the face of IGEL. And a lot of the videos we do are either with him or he's in them. So definitely check that out. He's just a brilliant guy, and you'll really enjoy it. So with no further ado, I'll just say thanks again to Simon, and thanks to each and every one of you guys for listening to this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a little bit. Definitely check out what the folks over at IGEL, including myself, is doing. If you're interested in IGEL, join the IGEL community too. Join.igelcommunity.com, and boom, you're in. What else do I say? But thank you very much for listening to DABCC Radio.
DABCC.
Say it again, DABCC.
DABCC.
Can you say it again, DABCC?
DABCC.
How about DABCC?
DABCC. BC.
DABCC.
GABCC.
DABCC.
GABCC.